everybody, so it's a fun video today because I'm showing off my Blu-ray collection, my full entire movie collection, Blu-rays, 4Ks, probably some DVDs sprinkled in as well as I'm slowly upgrading them all. I'm a huge fan of physical media. It's just one of those things that I've always appreciated. Regardless of the fact we're seeing all these different stores try and take away physical media like Best Buy, the overwhelming majority of my collection is alphabetized from A to Z. But there is a large stack of movies that I've acquired the last couple months that I have not filtered in, so it could be a little bit random from time to time on what exactly I pull out. But either way, let's get right into the full collection. Starting things off kind of controversial with 3 from Hell, the 4K steelbook of that. Not my favorite Rob Zombie movie by any means. I definitely think The Devil's Rejects is the best out of this trilogy. This one, it's just okay. I do collect a lot of steelbooks. You're going to see a lot of steelbooks in this collection. This is the steelbook for 1917. The steelbook for 101 Dalmatians, The Cure for Wellness. In my opinion, the first 2/3 of this movie are very strong, but then it kind of just falls apart a lot in the third act, which is really disappointing. 10 Cloverfield Lane, probably my favorite amongst the Cloverfield films so far. I have not watched A Monster's Call in a very long time, probably since I bought this, but it was great. It's just really sad, so it's not something I pop in all that often. Though I do usually love A24 films, A Ghost Story is not one I'm that particularly fond of, but I do own it. Steelbooks for A Quiet Place and Quiet Place Part 2. The Single Man, I really recommend it. Tom Ford directed this. Tom Ford, most people know him, of course, from other ventures, but I think he's a great director. It's just unfortunate that he's only done like this and Nocturnal Animals, I'm pretty sure. A Star is Born, the steelbook for A Star is Born, the Bradley Cooper, Lady Gaga version. The Accountant, in my opinion, a pretty underrated action film. I hear they're making a sequel to this finally. I don't know when or if that's ever going to actually happen. I don't own any of the other Addams Family films on physical media, but I do have the steelbook for the first Addams Family film from the 90s, the Barry Sonnenfeld one. The steelbook for Aladdin, not only is this just an amazing steelbook, it's probably one of my favorite Disney animated films of all time. I think I said this last year in my update video that I did not actually watch this yet, and that still remains to be true. I'm very sorry. I hear it's good, though. I try not to buy too many box sets if the series is still ongoing, since the box sets inevitably are going to be incomplete in some shape or form, but I do still have the steelbook set of the 6 films in the Alien franchise. This is, of course, Alien through Alien Covenant. Really excited about Alien Romulus. I'm really intrigued on where we're going to go with that entry. The steelbook for Alita Battle Angel. Nothing too special steelbook-wise. I mean, the back is empty, but the cover is really cool. I am all in on Alita Battle Angel. This movie was awesome. I am still hoping and praying we'll get a sequel inevitably. Like many people, for a period of time, I was really into American Horror Story, probably the first 5 or 6 seasons or so, and that's the seasons that I own so far on physical media. This is the first 6 seasons of American Horror Story. So Murder House through Roanoke. I have watched some of the other seasons since then, but I never was compelled to buy any of them. I think the last one I watched completely was 1984, just because it's a slasher and I love horror. The steelbook for American Sniper. I'm a big football fan, so I already was aware of Kurt Warner's story, but I did have to pick up the movie based around his life starring Zachary Levi. It was decent enough. It wasn't amazing by any means, but it was a solid film. Ever since this movie came out, it was kind of divisive, but I always kind of dug it, and that is Annihilation. I don't know, maybe I'm just really into weird sci-fi, and Alex Garland just delivers that, at least in this film. Steelbooks for the 3 Ant-Man films. Probably not my favorite Marvel trilogy by any means, but I own all the Marvel movies on physical media. Actually, I have every single Marvel movie as a steelbook. I own all the Evil Dead movies, but just in the way that everything's alphabetized, we have the steelbook for Army of Darkness. Though the packaging for this is kind of distracting because these flaps are attached to it and I can't take them off. It's Apocalypse Now, the definitive edition of Apocalypse Now. It's got 6 discs, it's 4K. Good old Aquaman, the steelbook to Aquaman. Aquaman The Lost Kingdom has not come out yet on physical media at the time of this release, but just for the completionist aspect, I probably am going to have to pick it up. Atomic Blonde on Blu-ray. Though I don't really like this movie, I picked it up at one point or another, and that is the steelbook for the Assassin's Creed film starring Michael Fassbender. Another barrage of Marvel steelbooks, all 4 Avengers films so far. So you got the first Avengers steelbook for Avengers Age of Ultron. I love the picture of Ultron actually on the back of the steelbook. Avengers Infinity War, and then Avengers Endgame with all of the various different Avengers on the front and back. Baby Driver on steelbook. The steelbook design is so cool, and at the time, this was an awesome movie. It's just unfortunate that a lot of the cast, by and large, in this movie have done some questionable things since then. Bad Times at El Royale on 4K. In my opinion, a very underrated movie. It is very Quentin Tarantino-esque in its execution, but I think it's a lot of fun. The 4K box set of Back to the Future Part 1, 2, and 3. Other than Spider-Man, Batman probably is my favorite superhero character of all time, so I own quite a lot of physical media of Batman. I do have the 2 animated films that they released before he passed away. These are both really fun. Got the majority of the voice cast back, and the cool thing about the second film is the fact that it centers around Two-Face, because Two-Face, if you aren't aware, Two-Face was not in the 1966 Batman show, so this is kind of like the introduction to him into that universe. And of all people, he's voiced by William Shatner, which makes this even more nostalgic in my opinion. There's still a lot more Batman. I have the Batman animated series on Blu-ray, and then I have Batman Beyond on Blu-ray. Just my childhood in a nutshell. I'm realizing as I filmed all this, I lent out my Batman set, the box set with all the different Batman films from the 89 Batman through Batman and Robin, so that is the reason why it's not here. But I still have a lot more Batman. You got the Batman Begins steelbook, which is really awesome. Batman v Superman steelbook. I love this steelbook because it's kind of like reversible in a way, because depending on which version, you could have Superman on the front or Batman. Most recent Batman, the Robert Pattinson-led The Batman. Beauty and the Beast on steelbook, the signature collection of Disney. Once again, it's up there with Aladdin and probably The Lion King as far as my favorite Disney animated films. The steelbook for Beetlejuice. I actually need to rewatch this before the second one that comes out later this year. Now, this is an underrated classic. This is the steelbook for John Carpenter's Big Trouble in Little China. Highly recommended. I think you'll just have a blast if you ever check this out. I don't own the third one, but I do have these really amazing steelbooks. The first 2 Bill and Ted films, just other things that I've just grew up watching. It's part of the reason why I love Keanu Reeves so much. Steelbook for Birds of Prey, and the very long title that I'm not going to ramble off all of, but I quite like Birds of Prey. I know that might be kind of an unpopular opinion. Blade Runner on Blu-ray, but I also have the steelbook for Blade Runner 2049. Black Klansman on 4K. The first of many Criterions in my collection, the Criterion Collection Blu-ray of The Blob, the classic Blob starring Steve McQueen. Booksmart on Blu-ray, the Criterion Collection version of The Breakfast Club, a classic from the 80s. Speaking of a classic, the steelbook for Bride of Frankenstein. I love these Alex Ross covers. And once again, another thing from the Criterion Collection, this is the Bruce Lee Criterion Collection they have going on. It's all of his films from Fist of Fury to The Game of Death. Steelbooks for both the Black Panther films. So they got the steelbook for Black Panther. Just what an amazing design on the front and back. And also the cover for Black Panther Wakanda Forever. I got the Shuri version. There is a Namor version as well, but I only got the Shuri version, at least at this point. And then another Marvel steelbook. I have the steelbook for Black Widow. Yet again, another really cool looking steelbook because it also has Yelena on the back. Steelbook for Bohemian Rhapsody. Movie that I've not liked as much as the years have went on, but it's still a movie that I do like a little bit. Bumblebee steelbook. Just such a breath of fresh air after how many bad Transformers movies we had. I adore everything about this entry. I have the Captain America trilogy in steelbook as well. I have Captain America: The First Avenger, Captain America: The Winter Soldier, another really amazing design here. And probably one of my favorite steelbook designs of all time. It is the steelbook design for Captain America: Civil War. Just so cool. Just switching from one captain to another with the steelbook for Captain Marvel. Casino Royale on steelbook. Just a really simple design here. Nothing too fancy. Another Walt Disney Collection steelbook, and that is the steelbook for Cinderella. Unfortunately, I haven't bought the third one yet, but I do own Creed 1 and Creed 2. The Creed 2 actually is a steelbook. If you do follow the channel, you probably know I'm a pretty big fan of the Child's Play franchise, so I have a decent amount of Chucky, but I don't have all of them, which I do need to rectify because Scream Factory finally put out the other films in the franchise on 4K, because I have Child's Play 1 on 4K, I have Child's Play 2 on 4K, and I also have Child's Play 3 on 4K, but I need to get the 4K versions of the rest of the films because now they're finally available, which is Bride of Chucky, Cult of Chucky, Seed of Chucky. Though I don't own those though, I do own the Child's Play remake on Blu-ray, so I guess that's something. This is a movie I didn't like a whole lot initially, and I've kind of softened on it a little bit. I still don't think it's great by any means, but Mark Hamill's a pretty solid choice if you're going to have somebody take over for Brad Dourif. Steelbook for Coco. Coming to America on Steelbook. One of my favorite comedies of all time, the complete series of Cowboy Bebop. One of the most amazing animes you could ever watch, in my opinion. Brawl on Blu-ray. Such an underrated movie, in my opinion. Creature from the Black Lagoon on Steelbook. This edition of Crimson Peak is one of the most amazing editions I've ever owned in my collection. It's from Arrow Video. It has so much amazing extra bonus content inside. And Guillermo del Toro is my favorite director of all time, so I own the majority of his films. And though this isn't one of my favorite movies of his, it has grown on me a lot as I've learned more about its production, reading about it, and all the different added stuff they added to this edition of it. Speaking of Guillermo del Toro, I have the Criterion Collection Blu-ray of Kronos, his first ever film. And some more Criterion Collection, The Curious Case of Benjamin Button. Sometimes when you're a completionist, you own some films that you're not particularly fond of, and that is the case here, because this is the Steelbook for Dark Phoenix. Here are the Steelbooks for The Dark Knight and The Dark Knight Rises. Here's a Steelbook I regret buying, the Steelbook for The Dark Tower. I can't wait for the new version that we're getting from Mike Flanagan, though. Hopefully that's a little bit better and more faithful to the source material. Dawn of the Planet of the Apes on Steelbook. Since Guillermo del Toro is my favorite director, I have some more entries in his filmography, and this is the Criterion Collection Blu-ray of The Devil's Backbone. I own 2 copies of Deadpool. One is a lot more special than the other. This is just the Steelbook version of the first Deadpool film. Nothing too crazy. The cooler one, in my opinion, in my collection, I bought many years ago when it was an exclusive at San Diego Comic-Con, and this is the San Diego Comic-Con exclusive of Deadpool, and it is signed by Ryan Reynolds. It's really cool. I still have it factory sealed all of these years later. I've never opened it. You also can't forget the Steelbook for Deadpool 2. I don't necessarily know why Deepwater Horizon has a Steelbook version, but I do own it. I love me some Pokemon, so I have Detective Pikachu, the Steelbook for that. Just an adorable cover. I don't know how many people remember Devils still, but I think this is a really underrated horror film, a horror thriller that came out many years ago, had involvement from M. Night Shyamalan. The Disaster Artist, just an all-around weird movie. I mean, it's to be expected because it is based around the true life story of The Room being filmed. I do own The Room on Blu-ray, spoiler alert. Django Unchained on Steelbook. This one's another special one in my collection. This is the Criterion Collection version of Do the Right Thing, but it's also signed by Spike Lee. Unfortunately, not very many people saw this in theaters, but I have the Steelbook for Dr. Sleep. I think that it's a crime that this movie didn't do as well as it should have. I think this should have been a big, colossal success. Mike Flanagan did a phenomenal job doing a sequel to The Shining. It's just unfortunate that it kind of bombed at the box office, but, you know, it is what it is. I just realized I missed some of the entries, so they're not alphabetical anymore, I guess you could say, but I have the Steelbook for Drive, Steelbook of Dracula, the Bela Lugosi version, Scream Factory Blu-ray of Drag Me to Hell, yet another underrated horror film. This one's from Sam Raimi. Most people probably know about it by now, but yeah, Drag Me to Hell is wild, especially for being PG-13. Some more Marvel Steelbooks. You have Doctor Strange and then Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. Both of them really cool designs for their Steelbooks. I think this movie is a little bit better. The Doctor Strange, the first film, I think is just a more interesting design since it is the Eye of Agamotto. For many years, I was a big fan of Doctor Who, and then I kind of fell off during the Peter Capaldi years, and I'm kind of getting back on with Shuti as the new Doctor. So I have a couple Doctor Who seasons, these Steelbooks. I have, you know, season 1 and season 2, so the first and only season with Christopher Eccleston and the first season with David Tennant as the Doctor. And then also I have the Steelbook for the 10th season with Peter Capaldi. Fusion Reborn and Wrath of the Dragon. Both of the cooler films, some of my favorite films. And then you have the first 3 Broly films. Another movie that deserved a lot more support in my opinion, Dread. Steelbook for Dunkirk, the Christopher Nolan film. E.T., the Extraterrestrial on Steelbook. 8th Grade on Blu-ray. Steelbook for Elf, a Christmas classic in my opinion. Now, this might be an unpopular opinion, but I actually quite like The Eternals. It's not one of my favorite MCU films by any means, but I do own the Steelbook of it, and I watch it from time to time, and I still think it's pretty solid. Everything, Everywhere, All at Once. Just Such an incredible film, rightfully deserving that Best Picture win amongst all of the other awards that the movie won. Now this steelbook is actually a double steelbook, as it is the 4K steelbook for both Evil Dead 1 and Evil Dead 2. And some more Evil Dead because I have the Evil Dead remake. Probably the coolest steelbook out of the bunch, and that is the steelbook for Evil Dead Rise. The cover is creepy, but the best thing of all, the back is a cheese grater. Ex Machina on Blu-ray, Fanboys on Blu-ray. In my opinion, if you're a big Star Wars fan, you probably have seen this movie, but if you haven't seen it, track down a copy, watch it somewhere if it's streaming somewhere. It's just one of those movies that you just love to watch as a Star Wars fan, not only just because of the cameos and the story involved, how they're gonna go and try and steal a copy of The Phantom Menace. All around, this is just a good, entertaining movie to watch with a ton of friends. I just realized I actually don't own The Secrets of Dumbledore, so I guess this goes to show you how much I remembered that film. But I do have these steelbooks for Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, and Fantastic Beasts and the Crimes of Grindelwald, which I don't think this one's very good, but I think the first Fantastic Beasts is actually pretty enjoyable. Fargo on steelbook, the film, not the TV show. I've heard so many amazing things about the TV show, but I've never actually picked it up. If any of you have watched it, let me know. Is it worth checking out? Farewell on Blu-ray, Favorite on Blu-ray, probably my favorite Yorgos Lanthimos movie, Fences on Blu-ray, Steelbook of The Fifth Element, some more Pixar steelbooks, these steelbooks for Finding Nemo and Finding Dory, John Wesley's Ship starring Flash show from the 90s. The first 3 seasons of The Flash. So you have The Flash season 1, then these really cool steelbooks for season 2 and season 3, and then I just stopped buying them, although I did continue to watch on CW until it finished. This big old Friday the 13th set from Scream Factory, just an amazing set all around. I don't like every Friday the 13th film, but this is the quintessential box set to own if you're a Friday the 13th fan. It has every single film in it from Friday the 13th through the remake, and it also even has Freddy vs. Jason in there. Going a little bit out of order again with the Fight Club steelbook that I own. Original Flatliners, not that really awful remake that came out a couple years ago. Ford v Ferrari, the steelbook for that, another incredible film. Forrest Gump on steelbook. We had Bride of Frankenstein earlier, and now we have Frankenstein on steelbook. Frozen on steelbook, the first Frozen. I don't own Frozen 2. I don't know what that says about how I feel about the films, but the first Frozen is actually not that bad. Galaxy Quest on Blu-ray. Once again, another amazing film that I grew up loving. Even though I was never a huge Star Trek fan, there's something about this movie always resonated with me. Steelbook for Jordan Peele's Get Out. Once again, another fantastic movie. I actually saw not too long ago that this is apparently out of print, so that's kind of cool, I guess. I have 2 steelbooks for Ghost in the Shell. I have the original Ghost in the Shell, the steelbook, the Mondo steelbook of that, and then I have the steelbook for the Scarlett Johansson film. 4K steelbook of Gladiator, one of those movies that I just think is a masterpiece all around, everything about it, the performances, the technical aspects, Ridley Scott, probably one of my favorite Ridley Scott films. And the ending for this movie is just one of those endings that always can make anyone cry, in my opinion. I don't know how you watch the end of this movie and not shed a tear in some shape or form. Glass on steelbook. I remember how hyped I was going into this after how amazing Split was, and the reveal at the end of Split that this was all connected and was going to culminate in this movie. And then eventually I kind of left this kind of disappointed, but the steelbook artwork is amazing, once again from Alex Ross. Being a huge Godzilla fan, I own quite a lot of his movies on physical media. I don't own all of them. Some of them, unfortunately, are out of print and very expensive, so I'm hoping to eventually get them down the line. But let's start with the biggest one of them all, and that is the Godzilla collection from Criterion, which is the first 15 Godzilla films. So it is Godzilla 1954 all the way through Terror of Mechagodzilla. I have a lot of the double features, so it's Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla and Godzilla versus Space Godzilla, Godzilla versus Destroya and Godzilla versus Megaguirus, Godzilla 2000, Godzilla against Mechagodzilla and GMK, Godzilla Tokyo SOS and Godzilla Final Wars. I do own the Roland Emmerich Godzilla film, the 4K steelbook of it. Godzilla 2014 on steelbook. Godzilla King of the Monsters on steelbook. And the steelbook for Godzilla vs. Kong. Once again, another amazing design. I think the back cover actually is my favorite amongst the 2 images. The alphabetical order was thrown off again because I just realized I own First Man on 4K. Good Burger. I think anyone that grew up in the 90s has some level of nostalgia towards Good Burger, so I had to own this on physical media. Good time. This was the movie to show anyone before the Batman that Robert Pattinson ended up being a fantastic actor after Twilight. Guardians of the Galaxy trilogy, possibly my favorite trilogy of the MCU. So you got Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, you have Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, and Guardians of the Galaxy 1, the 4K steelbook of that. Hacksaw Ridge on steelbook. I have a decent amount of the Halloween films, but I don't own all of them. We'll start off with the original, of course, which is the steelbook for the first Halloween from 1978. From Scream Factory, I have the steelbooks for Halloween 2 and Halloween 3, Season of the Witch. Which, speaking of Scream Factory, I do need to get the rest of them as they're put out now, but I couldn't pass up this steelbook of H2O. Just the cover of this is amazing. Rob Zombie's Halloween on steelbook, really cool cover here. The back also has a really cool design on it as well. Of the Rob Zombie films that he did, the Halloween 1 and 2, I don't think the first one is that bad, though. Halloween 2, very bad. Probably one of the worst sequels other than Resurrection. And the most recent Blumhouse trilogy from David Gordon Green. So, of course, Halloween 2018 on steelbook, Halloween Kills on steelbook, Evil Dies Tonight, and then arguably the most disappointing entry of the three, Halloween Ends, which just feels very ironic. It's supposed to have this whole showdown between Michael Myers and Laurie Strode on the steelbook packaging, but no mention of Corey Cunningham anywhere. This box set was disappointing because cover designs for all of the Harry Potter steelbooks are very bland and generic, but I do own all of them, so of course Deathly Hallows through the Sorcerer's Stone. They all aren't very exciting to look at, so I'm not going to bother showing all of them. They just look like this with the logos in different colors, not all that interesting. Greatest Showman on steelbook. Green Knight on 4K. I picked this up on Black Friday, I think 2 years ago now. Gone Girl on Blu-ray. Heat on Blu-ray. Heathers on steelbook. I have the steelbooks for two Hellboy films, Hellboy 1 and Hellboy 2, The Golden Army. I don't own the David Harbour-led Hellboy film. I think that movie was quite awful. Hell or High Water on Blu-ray. Hereditary on 4K. So many sequences in this movie still freak me out to this day. High Life on Blu-ray. Hocus Pocus on steelbook. This steelbook is another one I just think has an amazing design since it does look like the book from the film. Home Alone on steelbook, the first Home Alone. I don't know if there's a steelbook for Home Alone 2, but I hope there is one soon if there isn't already. Hot Fuzz on steelbook, one of my favorite Edgar Wright films along with Shaun of the Dead, which we'll get to eventually. House from the Criterion Collection. If you have not watched this movie, it is just an acid trip. It is bonkers. It's really hard to describe just because it is a very weird and out there movie, but it's one I recommend. House of the Dragon on steelbook. I don't own any of Game of Thrones yet, probably because I still haven't finished all of Game of Thrones because I'm doing those reactions with Larry, but I love House of the Dragon, and I've loved, for the most part, what I've seen of Game of Thrones, although the last couple seasons of Game of Thrones I've watched have kind of declined in quality. Some Studio Ghibli with Howl's Moving Castle on steelbook. Now, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes has not come out yet on physical media, so I do have the other 4 films in the franchise on steelbook, which is, of course, The Hunger Games, Catching Fire, and Part 1 and Part 2 of Mockingjay. Inception on steelbook. I just remembered I bought this, but I didn't put it on the shelf yet, so I just remembered it. And it is the 2-pack of the Blu-rays of The Haunting of Hill House and Haunting of Bly Manor. Always really cool to buy some of these physical medias for Netflix shows or streaming shows in general, just because you never know when they're going to pull that stuff off of streaming services. The Imitation Game. Steelbooks for The Incredibles, and then steelbook for Incredibles 2. Incredible Hulk, in my opinion, an underrated entry in the MCU. Inside Out on steelbook. I love Inside Out. Pretty much everything that Pete Docter does, I adore, so you can imagine I'm pretty elated for Inside Out too. Insomnia, in my opinion, probably one of the most overlooked entries in his filmography. Everything about this is excellent. And then the Blu-ray for Interstellar. Steelbook for The Invisible Man, and another Invisible Man. This is the most recent one from director Leigh Whannell. I cannot wait to see what he does with the Wolfman after this. Steelbooks for all 3 Iron Man films. So first up, the steelbook for Iron Man 1, Iron Man 2, and lastly, but certainly not least, Iron Man 3. And then a string of It steelbooks, because I have the steelbook for the original It, the one starring Tim Curry, and then I have steelbooks for both Chapter 1 and Chapter 2 of It, the Bill Skarsgård-led one. I am a big Stephen King fan, if you haven't noticed by now. Steelbook for It Follows. I actually saw that this also is another one I think is out of print now. Maybe because they're finally getting a sequel off the ground, maybe we'll get it back into print, but this is probably one of the coolest steelbooks in my collection. Jay and Silent Bob Reboot on Blu-ray. This one I'm kind of cheating with when it comes to being alphabetized, but it is Jackie Chan, the Criterion Collection of Police Story 1 and Police Story 2. If you have not seen these movies, this is just peak Jackie Chan when it comes to the action and the stunts. Steelbooks for John Wick 1, John Wick Chapter 2, and John Wick Chapter 3. The steelbook for Chapter 4 sold out pretty quickly, and unfortunately I was not able to get a copy, so it's on my list. Jojo Rabbit on 4K. Steelbook for Joker. Genuinely, I'm pretty intrigued on where we're going to go with the sequel coming out later this year starring Lady Gaga. Steelbook for the first Jumanji with Robin Williams. Then I have the Steelbook for the first Jumanji, Jumanji Welcome to the Jungle. I wasn't as big a fan of the sequel that followed this up, so I'm probably going to get it eventually down the line, but I was never in a rush and then I kind of forgot about it. I regret buying this, but I do own Justice League on Steelbook. The cover at least is really cool, but yeah, I regret buying this. I'm going to be buying the actual Justice League, Zack Snyder's Justice League, very soon. The first Karate Kid film on 4K. Kid Who Would Be King. This was one I bought on Black Friday many years ago. Honestly, I don't really remember all that much about it. I thought it was okay, at least from my vague memories of it when I saw it in theaters. More Studio Ghibli, Kiki's Delivery Service. Killer Clowns from Outer Space on Steelbook. Peter Jackson's King Kong on Steelbook. A double dose of Kingsman Steelbooks. Kingsman The Secret Service on Steelbook. And then Kingsman The Golden Circle on Steelbook. The cover art on this was really cool. Knives Out on Steelbook. Probably one of my personal favorite Steelbooks I have in my collection. Also, by the way, I need the sequel to eventually come out on physical media in some shape or form, which who knows because of it being on Netflix. Kong Skull Island Steelbook. La La Land on Steelbook. Steelbook for Lady and the Tramp. Steelbooks for both of the Angelina Jolie Tomb Raider films. Last Night in Soho on Blu-ray. Criminally underrated in my opinion. Lego Batman on Steelbook. Another addition to my large Batman collection. I'm still pretty upset that the Lego movies and all that stuff are not going to be a thing anymore. I still need to get the Lego movie on Steelbook, but I do have the sequel to it on Steelbook. A modern classic, The Lighthouse on Blu-ray. Lights Out. This was my introduction to David F. Sandberg as a director, and I'm really excited that he's finally getting back into doing horror after doing those Shazam films, because I had a lot of fun with this. Little Mermaid Steelbook from the Walt Disney Signature Collection. Following that up with another Steelbook from the Walt Disney Signature Collection, and that is The Lion King. Gorgeous Steelbook here, and one of my favorite Disney movies of all time. I don't know how many people still remember this movie called Locke, but it's actually quite thrilling, even though the entire movie takes place in a car with Tom Hardy, and a bunch of other people call in, of course, different actors. Tom Holland actually has a part in this, but yeah, highly recommend this. It's not a movie that's talked about enough. Logan on Steelbook, one of the best comic book movies of all time. Loki Season 1 on Steelbook. Not only is this Steelbook just absolutely gorgeous, it's one of the best things that's come out of the Marvel Disney Plus shows to this point. I cannot wait to get the second season on physical media as well. I'm glad that Disney finally is putting these out. Long Shot on Blu-ray. I don't know if too many people remember this from a couple years ago, but I thought it was kind of charming. Love and Mercy. I think this is a criminally underrated biopic when it comes to telling the story about Brian Wilson from the Beach Boys. Love, Simon. I hope one day that we get to see the Love, Victor series on physical media, because that's something I would also like to own, so I can accompany it with Love, Simon. The remake of The Magnificent Seven. I kind of regret owning this because I didn't think it was all that good, but I just collected it because it was a cool Steelbook. Mallrats. Such a hilarious film and probably one of my favorite Kevin Smith films all around. Man of Steel on Steelbook. Mandy on Steelbook. This was a fun Black Friday purchase several years ago. And on the opposite side of fun, I have the Criterion Collection of Marriage Story, a movie that I think is a brilliant film, but it's kind of hard to rewatch just because it is so emotional. Steelbook for The Martian. Mary and the Witch's Flower, a film that I think a lot of people have kind of forgotten about. It's made by former Studio Ghibli employees. I highly recommend it if you like that Studio Ghibli type style, but you've seen all the Studio Ghibli films. Criterion Collection version of Memories of Murder. Other than probably Parasite and Host, I think this is my favorite Bong Joon-ho film. Men on Blu-ray. This is a Black Friday purchase. This movie is it's interesting. I guess I'll just leave it at that. Mid-90s on Blu-ray. This probably is my least favorite Guillermo del Toro film, and that is Mimic. Slowly, I'm working on getting all the Mission Impossible films on physical media and steelbooks and then trying to upgrade them all to 4K. So I only have a sampling of them. So the first one up is Mission Impossible 1 on 4K steelbook. And then I have a steelbook for Ghost Protocol. Then a steelbook for Mission Impossible Rogue Nation. And then one for Mission Impossible Fallout. I still need to get Dead Reckoning Part 1 on physical media. So I have to wonder, because they took the Part 1 out of the title now officially, are they going to re-release it and then it's just going to have a physical media release where it's just Dead Reckoning and not Dead Reckoning Part 1. Moonlight. Mortal Kombat, the first Mortal Kombat film. I still need to get, unfortunately, Annihilation, and then the most recent film that came out a couple years ago. I do love me some kaiju, so I have the steelbook for the Mothra film, The Mummy on steelbook, the Boris Karloff version, then the Mummy Collection, which has all the Brendan Fraser films, and also the Scorpion King starring The Rock. Recent Mummy film with Tom Cruise in the lead, which I am not a huge fan of, but, you know, completionist. Some more Studio Ghibli with Nausicaa, Valley of the Wind on steelbook. On top of that, My Neighbor Totoro Totoro on Steelbook. Steelbook you probably won't see in too many collections, but this is the Steelbook for The New Mutants, which is a movie I actually had to travel out of state to go see because my state shut down all of its theaters during the pandemic, and I had to go a state over to watch it in theaters. Was it worth it? Not really, but it was just a fun experience. Nightcrawler, The Nightmare Before Christmas. Apparently, this is supposed to glow in the dark, but it has just never worked, but it's still fun to own on physical media. Northman on Blu-ray. You see me on Steelbook, the Steelbook for the first film, and then I have the Steelbook for the second film as well. Oculus. I was a huge fan of Karen Gillan going into this, and I still am a big fan of her work. I went out of this as a bigger fan of Mike Flanagan and wanted to see his career continue to blossom. He's another one of those directors I think is one of my favorites. Another fun fact about this movie is that WWE had a part in producing this movie. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood on Steelbook. I love me some martial arts films, so this is the Ong Bak trilogy on Steelbook. These movies are wild, especially the first one. During that era, I was a huge fan of Tony Jaa. Between these films and The Protector, Overlord on 4K. This movie is insane. Regrettably, I don't own the first movie on physical media, but I do have the Steelbook for Pacific Rim Uprising, which is definitely not as good as the original Pacific Rim. Parasite on Blu-ray. I still need to get the Criterion release of Parasite, but yeah, this is a masterpiece in my eyes. Speaking of masterpieces, in my opinion, my favorite Guillermo del Toro film, and that is Pan's Labyrinth, the Criterion Collection edition. A double dose of Pet Sematary. We have the original Pet Sematary on Mondo Steelbook. Very cool design here. And then I have the Steelbook for the more recent remake of Pet Sematary. Peter Pan on Steelbook. Portrait of a Lady on Fire, the Criterion Collection edition. Power Rangers Steelbook. I am still extremely salty we never got a follow-up to this movie. I enjoyed it quite a bit. A couple different Predator Steelbooks. First up, we have the Predator 3 movie collection Steelbook, which is the Steelbook of Predator 1, Predator 2, and Predators. Fortunately, I have a Steelbook for The Predator, in my opinion, probably the worst of the Predator movies that doesn't have the Xenomorph in it. I was so excited they actually put this out finally on physical media, and that is the Steelbook for Prey. Not only is this Steelbook just absolutely gorgeous, although it was extremely expensive. That's one of the things I've hated about collecting Steelbooks in recent years is how they've jacked up the price, but still, nevertheless, I am very happy to own this. The Criterion Collection of The Princess Bride. It's literally a storybook. How can this not be the coolest Criterion they've made so far, other than maybe the absolutely massive Godzilla collection? I don't own the second one, but I do own the first Problem Child on Blu-ray. Got a handful of the Purge movies on Steelbook, and here is The Purge on Steelbook. Purge Anarchy, then The Purge Election Year. I don't own the first Purge, and I have not ever actually watched the show The Purge, so I'll get around to them eventually. One of my favorite Pixar films, Ratatouille on Steelbook. Steelbook for Raya and the Last Dragon. Ready or Not on Blu-ray. The Blu-ray case is pretty ugly, and you can blame Disney for that. Steelbook for Ready Player One. Rise of the Planet of the Apes. The Revenant. Another classic, this is the Arrow Steelbook of RoboCop. I don't own the other RoboCops, but honestly, the first RoboCop is the best one. And this is the Steelbook collection of all of the Rocky films, so Rocky through Rocky Balboa. Rocket Man on Steelbook. I told you earlier I own The Room, and that is true. I have the Blu-ray of The Room right here. It's real. A movie I have not watched in a very long time, but I do have the Steelbook for Sausage Party. Now, Scream has always been my favorite horror franchise, so I had to make sure that I have a lot of physical media for it. I have almost the entire franchise on Steelbook, except for 4. I'll show you all of them but 4. Firstly, here's the Steelbook for Scream 1, Steelbook for Scream 2, switching it up with Scream 3 Steelbook, this nice blood red, Scream 5, last but certainly not least, Scream 6. Who knows what the future holds for the franchise, since everything is in limbo right now, but at least if we're gonna end things with Scream 6, I think this is a pretty great ending for the franchise for a very long time. Criterion Collection version of Seven Samurai. 4K Steelbook for Saw, another franchise of horror that I quite enjoy. Even though some of the sequels, I mean, let's be real, we all know that some of the sequels in the Saw franchise aren't great, though I am patiently waiting for them to do 4K releases of the other sequels, because we still, at this moment in time, we don't have any 4K releases of Saw 2 through 7, so I am patiently waiting for those, inevitably. Steelbook for The Shape of Water, Steelbook for Shang-Chi, Dawn of the Dead Steelbook, probably my favorite Edgar Wright film. Shazam Steelbook, I still don't own the Steelbook for the sequel, but I don't know, the universe is dead, I'm not really that excited about getting it either. Shin Godzilla on Blu-ray, I probably should have lumped this in with all the other Godzilla releases, but it's alphabetical, so I kind of forgot about it. Steelbook for The Shining, although it is an extremely bland, plain Steelbook, it's just cool to own on Steelbook. The Criterion Collection version of The Silence of the Lambs, Sing 1 on Steelbook, Steelbook. I don't own the sequel though. I do need to get on that eventually. Skyfall, probably one of my favorite movies in the Daniel Craig era, which is up there with Casino Royale. Sleeping Beauty on Steelbook from the Walt Disney Signature Collection. Steelbook for Sonic the Hedgehog and Sonic the Hedgehog 2. This one, far superior design just because it looks just like the video games. Soul on Steelbook. Finally, after so many years, I actually got to see this in a movie theater for the first time this week, and that was pretty nice. Southpaw on Steelbook. This is a classic from my childhood. That is the Steelbook for the first Space Jam film. The newer one, Space Jam: A New Legacy, not as big of a fan of. I'll eventually collect it down the line on physical media. Spider-Man is my favorite superhero of all time, so I own quite a lot of his stuff on physical media. This is the collection Steelbook of the Raimi films, which is a gorgeous Steelbook right there. And then I have the Steelbook for the Amazing Spider-Man films, Amazing Spider-Man 1 and 2. Then we have the John Watts films, so it's Spider-Man Homecoming, Spider-Man Far From Home, and this cover is just hideous, but, you know, it is what it is. Last but not least, Spider-Man No Way Home. This cover is amazing. I love this one a lot. And last but certainly not least, the Steelbook for Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. Ironically, I don't own the Steelbook for Across the Spider-Verse yet, but I did just put an order in with that and my pre-order for the Marvels, so it'll be coming in the near future. I just don't own it yet because I've been slacking. Next up, my personal favorite Studio Ghibli film, Spirited Away. Sprinkling of Star Wars physical media. We have the Steelbook for Solo, A Star Wars Story. These editions of Star Wars are really cool because they have the unedited Star Wars that you would have seen back in the day. Star Wars New Hope, Star Wars Empire Strikes Back, and Star Wars Return of the Jedi. And it's really fun to see what they used to look like without all the different changes that George Lucas did over the decades. Though the trilogy is by and large fairly messy, I do own all three of the films in the sequel trilogy. So this is the Steelbook for The Force Awakens, Steelbook for The Last Jedi, The Rise of Skywalker on Steelbook. Another purchase I regret, this is the Steelbook for Suicide Squad, the David Ayer Suicide Squad. I still need to pick up The Suicide Squad, the far superior Suicide Squad film, but I do own this. Superbad, one of my favorite comedies growing up. Big Baltimore Ravens fan, so I do have the DVD of the Super Bowl 47 championship. Hopefully, we're going to do well in the playoffs this year as well. The Suspiria remake from Luca Guadagnino. I think this remake is phenomenal. People probably don't remember Tag from a few years back, but I thought this was extremely funny for what it was. Steelbook for all three Taken films. Steelbook for Tenet, another amazing Steelbook design here. I don't own all of the Terminator films, although I have seen them all hundreds of times at this point, but I do have the Blu-ray for Terminator 2 Judgment Day. I haven't upgraded to 4K because everyone tells me that the transfer on the 4K is awful. And I do have the Steelbook for Terminator Genesis because I bought it used at an FYE many years ago with a coupon. They Live Steelbook from Scream Factory. Keeping up with what I said before, owning every single MCU film on Steelbook, I have all four Thor films. Thor 1, Thor The Dark World, Thor Ragnarok, and last but certainly not least, Thor Love and Thunder. Tomb Raider, the Alicia Vikander version. I'm kind of bummed out that we didn't end up getting a sequel to this version because it isn't an amazing Tomb Raider film by any means, but I really liked Alicia Vikander in the role. I swore I owned both Top Gun and Top Gun Maverick, but I guess maybe I don't because I do have the Steelbook for Top Gun Maverick. Toy Story is my favorite Pixar franchise, so I have all four of them on Steelbook. Got Toy Story 1, Toy Story 2, Toy Story 3, and Toy Story 4. Train to Busan on Steelbook. In my opinion, probably one of the best, most recent zombie films to come out. I know they're still trying to do that American remake, but just watch this movie. I am a fan of the franchise Transformers, though. The films are very hit or miss, but this is the collection of all the Michael Bay Transformers films. Steelbooks for both of the Venom films. So we have the Steelbook for the first Venom. I still am not a huge fan of this. And though it is much shorter, I actually do think Venom Let There Be Carnage is a little bit slightly better. Maybe partially because it is so short. We're going a little bit out of order again because I forgot I own the Steelbook for the Transformers animated film from the 1980s, a classic. The Criterion release of Uncut Gems. This cover is just so cool to look at. Another amazing Steelbook design. This is the Steelbook for Us from Jordan Peele. I don't know why I own Valerian in the City of a Thousand Planets, but I do. War for Planet of the Apes on Steelbook. Steelbook for WandaVision is another one I love having in my collection. WandaVision still is my favorite Marvel Disney Plus show. Watchmen, the director's cut on Steelbook. I haven't watched this in such a long time, but this is the Blu-ray for Waves. Whiplash on Steelbook. Widows on 4K. I have not watched this in a very long time, but I bought it during a Criterion sale not too long ago, and that is Wildlife. This is actually the directorial debut of actor Paul Dano. Witch on Blu-ray. I need to upgrade this to 4K eventually. Two Steelbooks for Wonder Woman. Steelbook, this is the Wolfman. Wreck-It Ralph, although I don't own a steelbook for the sequel. Blu-ray for X, I still need to buy Pearl, especially before Maxine eventually comes out. Original X-Men, X2, X-Men United, X-Men The Last Stand, X-Men First Class, one of my personal favorites, X-Men Days of Future Past, yet another one of my favorites. Unfortunately, we end off with one of the worst ones, and that is X-Men Apocalypse. I do need to get the rest of these, but I do have the first 2 steelbooks of Season 1 of Yu Yu Hakusho, and then also Season 2 of Yu Yu Hakusho. Finally, to end things off, I have a section of movies that I have not added into my collection yet that are just in a pile back there, so there's no rhyme or reason, they're not alphabetical for anything. The Usual Suspects, though this looks like a DVD, it is a Blu-ray DVD combo. It's just a very old Blu-ray DVD. Freakazoid, does anybody remember Freakazoid besides me growing up in the 90s watching cartoons like this and Animaniacs? Danny Phantom, the complete series of Danny Phantom. I loved Danny Phantom growing up. I just heard recently they're working on a live action film, which has me even more excited, so I'm probably going to revisit this sometime in the near future. The complete series of Hey Arnold, yet another show I loved growing up as a kid watching Nickelodeon. And there it is. That is my collection update for 2024. All the things I've picked up between this video and the one I posted back in 2023. Yeah, I own a lot of physical media. I'm always down to collect more just because it's such a fun thing to collect. As a big fan of movies and TV, just owning everything just feels so much cooler. It's a feeling that can't be replicated, how great it feels just being able to walk over to my shelf, pick up a movie, and just watch it, as opposed to searching through 500 streaming services to maybe, hopefully, have the movie or show that I want to watch on there. Make sure you share your thoughts down below on everything when it comes to my collection. And like always, be sure to leave a like and also subscribe if you haven't already. Strip date reviews, reactions, unboxings, and many more stuff on the channel coming up in 2024. But until next time, I'll see you guys later.